Hello, my love, and welcome back to the Shamelessly Ambitious podcast. Today, on episode 137, we are talking about belonging, but different than maybe you've experienced before. We're more importantly talking about exclusion. So, I did this really, really cool thing. Gosh, it's been like a couple months now. I did a couple story extraction calls with a colleague of mine who I love so dearly. Her name is Katie Quesada, and she is an amazing storytelling coach. And within this extraction, I basically shared my whole raw, vulnerable, real story and put it there on the table. Here it is. What do I do with it? And part of this is because I so deeply understand, and whether you're a business owner or not a business owner, I think we all need to deeply understand the value and importance of belonging as a whole. It is absolutely imperative to feel a sense of belonging. In fact, I took a moment and I was like, I want to research, go a little bit deeper. I mean, I've read a bazillion books about belonging, but in essence of this particular podcast, I wanted to know, what is the actual definition? Okay, so I'm going to read it to you. A sense of belonging, the subjective feeling of deep connection with social groups, physical places, and individual and collective experiences, is a fundamental human need that predicts numerous mental, physical, social, economic, and behavioral outcomes. Meaning that our sense of belonging actually predicts so much of the successes in our lives, whether it's our relationships, of course, it's our businesses, it's our economic status and how we achieve in the world, it's our mental health, it's our physical health. I mean, it is literally everything. And this dates back in time to way, 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 way back when, in essence, our survival was highly, highly regulated and related to our tribe and the people we were together, because alone there was no sense of survival, right? And so what happens is that we are stirred into a fight, flight, or freeze response nowadays, even though we're not living in a culture where we need people in order to literally survive, i.e., if a tiger comes to attack us and there's 10 of us, we have a greater chance of survival. Or if we're, a group of 10, a village of 10, and we need to hunt for food, we're going to have multiple people with different skill sets. Like, it was actual survival. While that might not be the truth anymore, the truth that is very important is that that still applies to us. We still feel that internally and biologically, whether or not we're aware of that. So when we feel as though we don't belong, right? Like, I don't fit in, I don't have people I can connect with, I'm not heard, I'm not seen, I'm not valued, I'm not supported. Like, those feelings can trickle into every aspect of our lives, which is a really interesting thing to think about. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because on these story coaching calls, that's been a huge fundamental piece of why I so deeply want to continue sharing my story and doing so in a way that can be heard and felt by others and can create a sense of belonging for others. Because there is no greater truth than the fact that when we share our stories, when we lean into vulnerability and honesty and authenticity, when we say these things out loud, not only does it create a sense of belonging for us because we're able to be witnessed, but it creates a sense of belonging for others who can see themselves in parts of our stories and have that kind of me too effect. Now, I'm not here really to talk about all the business things, but this is a huge aspect in my business. Is how am I creating belonging inside of my communities, but also creating belonging outside of my communities within my audiences, right? Like, how am I sharing in a way that gives people the me too effect so they know they're not alone, right? And whether or not that's the only value they ever get out of tuning into my podcast or, following me on Instagram, I would feel so successful. Like, honestly, if that's the only value they get. But of course, there's also strategy behind, like, the more you feel like you relate to somebody, the more likely you are to invest in them, to utilize their programs, to witness them as a potential sort of handholder or arm linker who can take you to the next level. So it's a really powerful thing. But it's also really important for us to navigate that and witness that in ourselves on a day-to-day basis of, like, how am I, yes, cultivating belonging outside of myself and for others, but also cultivating belonging for myself, right? So I swear I'm going to bring this all full circle, but I have a second story. Okay. So I was actually speaking to a private client of mine. And as you know, I'm leaving Texas. And we were talking about my selfish era. We were talking about all the time that I took off business and what exactly I did, because she's exploring doing this for herself. And she was ultimately like, what did you do every day? Like, when you took everything off your plate, what did you do? And it was funny because we have one similarity in common. Not just one. We have lots, but this in particular is that I was feeling at the end of the last year incredibly lonely. In this new place, my family was supposed to be here and they're not here, not feeling like I could really connect to people, just feeling out of my depth, I guess you can say, like just really not connected. And that was incredibly hard to experience because I felt it. I felt it in my business, I felt it in my day-to-day, I felt it in everything, okay? And she has a very similar experience right now that she's having. And so she had witnessed that I just finally made friends. I feel like I now have a community here and we're leaving, which is very bittersweet. But I was telling her that I couldn't just jump right into it. I couldn't just, "Oh, I wanna make friends. I'm just gonna dive out and do it." I had to take care of myself first and gain some of that, like, inner confidence to go out there and share my story and trust that the right people would hear it and that some people would hear it and they wouldn't be the right people. In fact, I had many, many a coffee dates with people where I walked away going, "Nope, that was not it. That probably isn't gonna be the friendship that blossoms." And then a whole bunch that was like, "Man, that was so refreshing and so life-giving." But I'm not going to pretend, and this is what I shared with her, I'm not gonna pretend like it wasn't challenging. It took intention. It is so much easier to just stay at home, to not join the programs, to not invest in a retreat or a networking event. I'm not even saying you have to pay for everything, but like, let's be honest. I've paid for a lot of my friends because getting into the rooms with the right people, I felt like I wanted to kind of skip the line, like I can go through and kiss a bunch of frogs and try my damnedest to find the right people, or I can go to a program or a membership or a retreat or an event that I know is calling out to people just like me and trust that I'll find my people there, right? Let's just be honest about that. So anyhow, I was sharing with her, I had to heal myself first. I couldn't just dive into it, but then I dove in. And when I was ready to dive in, I felt like my life, like, of course, losing weight and feeling better in my body, like these things definitely made an impact. Trust me, like resting more, prioritizing my sleep, all these things made a big difference. But the thing that made the biggest difference for me was relationships. Period. End of story. In fact, one of the big things I did, and this I did right out the gate, is I reached out to how many was it? It was like 3 or 4 women who, let's just do a little shout out. Jamie, my girlfriend Jamie, who I have known since I was in middle school. And we've always, we're always friends, but we've done a poor job at staying in touch. So I reached out to her. My girlfriend Catherine, who I met in Charlotte, North Carolina, and just loved her from the moment I met her. Same thing. We reach out, we connect every once in a while, but there wasn't a whole lot of intention behind it, unfortunately. My girlfriend Kelly, who I met actually kind of on Instagram, her team reached out to me to be on the podcast. So she was on the podcast once as a guest, and we instantly hit it off. And we have been in each other's DMs and supported each other, but at the same time, really didn't like go deeper in friendship. So I reached out to her. And my girlfriend Andi, who I've always been just obsessed with, love her to pieces, met her in the online space as well inside of a group coaching program. And so I essentially reached out to each of these women and said, I would love to get closer and to be more connected and to be more intentional. And that felt raw and vulnerable in and of itself because God forbid somebody would be like, nah, of course they would not do that. But so I started to have ongoing, like weekly, every other week, kind of depended on availability, calls with these women, Zoom calls, on the actual phone calls, like we were just connecting. And it reminded me of how important it was. And it ignited this like desire, I guess, to get out in person as well and do the thing. Especially remembering like with Catherine, I was brand new to Charlotte too. I didn't know anybody there and I connected with her and it changed the game for me. And so we started to connect with our neighbors, with our friends' parents, our kids' friends' parents who are our age. And I cannot say enough. It was the thing that shifted it all. Like, it was the thing that reminded me who I was. It was the thing that woke me up. It was the thing, right? So I wanted to share that because I think it's really valuable and really important and just a really, really good reminder, of course. And I mentioned I want to talk about exclusion. So going back to the story coaching calls with my friend Katie, who also, by the way, came out to Texas and I got to have dinner with her in person. And that was also a very memorable, lovely experience. And she brought a friend, Jen, who I connected with and loved. And So it's so interesting what can happen the minute that you open your eyes and your mind and your heart to relationships because I felt like they just started to pour in. But, anyways, we had our calls and she asked this profound, like, life altering question to me that I have been reflecting on ever since our call. And it was more of a reflective question as she listened to all of my stuff. She was like, "You have purposefully excluded yourself on a number of instances where others might have not, at the within the name of belonging, right?" So she'd actually said, she goes, "I almost wonder, like, what have you left at the altar of belonging?" Ooh, let me ask that question again. What have you left at the altar of belonging? And it hit me like a ton of bricks because there's two sides of the coin, right? There's the side where we want to be intentional and conscious and cognizant of our belonging, both in how we cultivate it out, but also how we cultivate it in. But then there's this other side of when and how are we choosing to do something or not do something or be something or experience something or you fill in the blank, right? In order to belong, in order to belong. And it brought up this really beautiful conversation between her and I, and then multiple people since then, of chosen versus given exclusion. Now, being excluded is a heart wrenching experience. If you listen to my last podcast, I went in deep with a very exclusion based story with some friends who are no longer friends. It happened last year. It was very, very painful for me. Being excluded is painful. And the truth of the matter is, sometimes we have to purposefully exclude ourselves. And she recognized this in me, and I'm just very appreciative of this recognition and just being seen and felt in this. She goes, if everybody I've ever connected with and listened to their story, no matter how uncomfortable it is, no matter how painful it has been, and the history of having it, you choose self-chosen exclusion over and over and over again because you're not willing to leave anything at the altar of belonging. And ultimately, what this means is, who are you being so that other people are comfortable and include you, right? How are you acting so that other people are comfortable and include you? How are you choosing inclusion instead of exclusion for the reasons of comfort, right? Even though the discomfort of self-exclusion would awaken a whole new version of you. The truth of the matter is, here I am in this place where I've finally connected and created friendships, and we are still leaving. And there's fear. Don't get me wrong. There is fear for sure. And yet we're going because I want to belong, but I want to belong to myself first. And when I'm living out of integrity of what it is that I desire and what values that I hold and the things that I want in my life, it just nothing matters. We have to first belong to ourselves. And that's kind of the full circle moment as to why I was sharing with my client that I needed to take care of me before I tried to go out there and get connected. So on the one end, I so deeply, deeply believe that a sense of belonging is pivotal, is non-negotiable, is vital to our survival, our health, our wellness. But I believe that the actual crux of it all is that we have to first belong to ourselves. And so I wanted to bring that question to this podcast because I want you to ask yourself, what am I leaving at the altar of belonging? Where am I staying stuck just so I can belong? I know I've experienced this inside my family, and I know many people can relate to that, like continuing to show up as a version of you that's not really true to you anymore because you want to belong to your family. Doing things inside your business that other people are telling you to do inside your business because you're afraid to do what you want to do and then no longer fit in or be seen as somebody who is crazy or whatever the case may be. I can think of so many examples from, of course, all four of our sell it all and leave examples because I cannot tell you, yes, there's so many handfuls of people who go, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I would love to do something like that. That's so inspiring. That's so great. And then there's also handfuls of people who go, wow, you're going to do that again? You're going to sell it all again? What a waste of money. How much money are you losing? Like the thoughts, the beliefs, it would be so easy to just shrink and just do what everybody else is doing. But I refuse to leave any part of me at the altar of belonging. because I put belonging to myself first. And not always, let's be honest. This is a podcast about realism, okay? So there are times when I've struggled with this. Hello, selfish girl era. I had to restart. I had to reset because I'd kind of lost that. I forgot and I needed to remember that I needed to belong to me first. And then all the other belonging gets to come after. In fact, I was in a mastermind last year and it was great in all intents purposes, but there was no connection. And I very much can blame that on the structures of the mastermind. I definitely think there's a massive gap in the industry for how people cultivate belonging. Trust me, like I want to solve this problem because it's sort of gut wrenching. But I also want to take radical responsibility and look at myself. Like I wasn't open to connection because I didn't belong to me. So, how are you choosing and actively, intentionally pursuing belonging to yourself? And can you take a very radical responsibility look at where you're leaving parts of you and your values and your honor at the altar of belonging? What needs to change? Where do you need to put your foot down and do things differently and choose differently? We all want to belong. So I'm here to validate and empathize that to the core. Like, absolutely, I get it. And man, the magic that gets to exist when you belong to you, when you're not sacrificing your values to belong to others, there aren't words. There are not words for how good it is. It's so good. It's so good. So that's what I wanted to bring to today's conversation. Loneliness is an epidemic right now, but I actually think the root cause is self belonging and then belonging, I guess you would call it, other belonging. But first, self. And so that's my invitation to you today to belong to self. And I'm so excited because this really sets the tone for my brand new, newly renovated membership, which is right around the corner. We will start talking about it more and more come July. But man, I'm pouring my heart and soul into this because this is the space where you belong, where I belong, where we belong, where belonging is the very tippy top of everything that we do, from self belonging to other belonging. And ultimately, you get to come home to yourself, to others. Ugh, it's extraordinary. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited for it. So just dropping that little nugget here. Nothing for you to do except for keep your eyes peeled because it's coming and it's hot and it's soft. It's both. It's all the things. And I'm so excited. So, my friend, choose you today.